Hello and welcome to American Government. This is Module 2. We're going to be talking about the structure of American government in this section, and it's going to be chapters 1, 2, and 3 in your textbook. There's several other ideas that are in here. You have a video about collective action problems, most specifically the prisoner's dilemma. The prisoner's dilemma has a large bearing on chapter 1. After all, we're not interested in this so much because I expect you all to be prisoners someday, questioned by the police. Although, if you're ever questioned by the police, ask for an attorney. Otherwise, this will give you some insight into just how clever they are. But anyway, the prisoner's dilemma, what it really tells us about is why we need some strong government agency or leader who can incentivize people to overcome their doubt that someone will actually cooperate with them as they've agreed to. Because after all, it's always to your benefit to defect from an agreement if somebody offers you more than the agreement offers you. And quite often what government does is it coordinates this agreement. It forces people to fulfill contracts. And in fact, in the early part of the history of American government, a lot of what government did was it required people to fulfill contracts. The contract that perhaps the government is a little more interested in now is the U.S. Constitution. And the U.S. Constitution is, in fact, in a way, a contract. It requires things like freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is, of course, a miserable thing in some ways. It allows people to say horrible things. You don't need freedom of speech to say nice things. If you ever are listening to the President of the United States talk and you want to yell out, "We love you, Joe," no one's going to throw you in jail for that. But what would happen if you didn't like him? What would happen if you protested him? It's nice to know that you can say things in the United States that are political. Certain things you can't say, but political things that you can say that are protected from your jailing. Now, the Constitution isn't necessarily designed to protect you from, having people not like you anymore. But the government's not supposed to be able to jail you for saying something unpopular. And if you look to other countries, other relatively free countries like the United Kingdom, you see a lot of people who are in fact imprisoned for, usually very vile things that they've said. And yet the protection for things that are controversial and not vile is that sometimes we have to let people say some really terrible things so that the people who are only saying controversial things do not have to be afraid. Well, anyway, I could talk for a long time about the First Amendment. I'm a big fan. However, that's only one amendment, and Chapter 2 is going to invite you to learn all about the entire U.S. government. I'm sorry, the entire U.S. Constitution. And then Chapter 3 talks about federalism, which, whether you view it as a feature or a bug of the American system, is certainly a part of the American system where there is power in the hands of both the state government and the national government. In addition to those 3 chapters, then I would spend one day on Chapter 1, one day on Chapter 2, one day on Chapter 3, and then the other days of the week we would have discussion. We do have a written discussion about the prisoner's dilemma. Getting started on it right away could be very important. It sometimes takes us a little bit longer to do a good job than we think it will. That's not to say these are the only things you'll need to know. as the midterm approaches, you should be aware that there will be many questions on the midterm. And people tend to do real well on the quizzes. They're open book and open note. All of my assignments are. There's ways that I have devised to keep you from working with your friends on it. I've decided in some ways that telling you that it would be closed book and closed note would be so hard to enforce that in a lot of ways it would just be a tax on honesty, and I don't like to punish people who are honest. So I like to tell you, you're not being dishonest. If you have notes, if you've done studying on this, then go ahead and use those notes for this paper. But I'm sorry, for this quiz. But I would also warn you that that's not a good time to just throw out all of your notes for things that weren't on that quiz. So anyway, if you have any questions for me whatsoever, if you need to contact me, feel free to contact me. I prefer strongly my campus email. So that's csnook1@kennesaw.edu. Try not to send me a message through the D2L messaging system. It gets all confused with, I can't reply on my mail, and so then when it comes through as an email on my campus email, then I'll respond to it, and only later will I discover that I've replied to that you can't reply through the campus email to the D2L page, or it will come back, it will bounce back, and it won't get through. And I won't learn that right away. And every semester there's a few students who miss out for several hours on the replies because it didn't tell me which it was. And then anyway, use the campus email. Otherwise, be sure to watch the PowerPoints, and I will be in touch with you again soon. Good luck.